Hey everyone, it's 6:30. It's the November meeting of the Congestion Pricing Task Force. Craig, you want to give it another couple of minutes, see if other people join?
Sure. Yeah, I only see 9 participants, so let's give it a few.
Okay.
I apologize in advance if I start coughing. I've had a little cough the last week or two that just doesn't seem to be going away. Nothing bad, just I may be coughing throughout at times, and I apologize.
No worries. Hope you feel better.
Thank you. I'm fine. I may sound a little nasally and congested, but it's nothing.
That's good. Ricola helps. Not that there's a product placement here, but
Please just don't sing the
I will not sing that, nor will I yodel or play
because that'll be
that.
stuck in my head all night.
Yeah, well, thanks. Now you just did that to me. So
All right, we're up to 13. This may be it, given that it is
2 days before Thanksgiving.
exactly. Well, we'll try to be concise and hopefully allow everyone to enjoy their pre-holiday time or be productive in their pre-holiday time.
Or just relaxed and anticipating the parade or turkey or no turkey.
All right, why don't, unless I missed it, should we have Saida give the little introduction speech?
Yes, you did not miss it, and we should.
Good evening,
Hi,
everyone.
Saida.
Hi,
Saida.
everyone. Hi. Good evening, everyone. A few notes for you, particularly if this is your first meeting with us. You'll notice that you are muted and unable to mute yourself or unmute yourself. After board members have concluded their discussions and presentations, co-chairs may call on members of the public who wish to speak. You can ask to be recognized by raising your virtual hand, and you can do that by going to the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and selecting raise hand. It's important not to raise your physical hands or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you among the participants. If you are on a phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute. Once you're recognized by a co-chair, I'll unmute you and you may be prompted to confirm unmuting on your device. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you can access the raise hand feature by clicking the participants button on the menu at the bottom of your screen and selecting raise hand. The chat function is available for technical support only, not to ask questions of the co-chairs. You can send me a chat if you're having any trouble, and I can help walk you through any issues you may be having. Back to you, Craig and Alita.
Thank you. Okay, Craig, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, good evening, everyone, and happy Thanksgiving Eve. I'm Craig Ladle, co-chair of the Community Board 8 Manhattan Congestion Pricing Task Force, along with Alita Camp. Sincerely, thank you for joining us tonight. We hope this meeting is worthwhile. I guess let's just get started. The first item was just any updates to report since the last meeting, and I was rummaging through news reports and such, and I didn't really see any official notices or announcements or anything specific in regards to congestion pricing updates of substance. So I don't know, Alita, if you have anything that you had seen, but otherwise I say there's no real update at this point.
No, I don't have a real update. What I have for anyone who's interested is the name of the company that apparently has been selected to implement physically the congestion pricing scheme. So they'll be putting up all of those devices that tag your Easy Pass or your license plate to send you a bill by mail. And they are not in New York State, they're in Nashville, and their name, if anyone wants to look them up, is TransCore, TransCore, and right on their website, they have congestion pricing and how they will be not administering, but I guess implementing the program. So I just wanted, that's the only thing that I found. It's not even really an update, but it's all I found that people might not know about.
Thank you for that, Alita. All right, then I guess we could move into the topic of the day. And Alita and I had spoken, and I know that we both agree that there's been a lot of discussion in the past regarding parking. So much like we tried to last month in regards to addressing issues regarding persons with disabilities, we thought we'd try to have a focused discussion on parking impacts and potential recommendations that we can make in regards to any parking concerns that people may have. So if you don't mind, let me just start with a brief review of what the environmental assessment said, just to provide that context. And again, as I've said before, that is essentially the findings from the environmental review process. I'm not opining on it or not. I know many people may wish to disagree with it, but I'm just providing it here for context and the MTA's perspective on it. So Saida, if you don't mind just putting up the, wait, I just went off the screen, and sharing the screen for the few slides that I had put together. And these I took directly from what I had done a few months ago when I reviewed the entire EA. So I'll go through this quickly. So let's just give Saida a second. Okay, here we go. Okay, so like this, I just took directly from the environmental, from the slideshow that the MTA had provided in regard, parking and social conditions. So the key findings that they had in parking were that there would be a reduction of parking demand within the central business district. There would be increased parking demand at subway and commuter rail stations outside of Manhattan Central Business District and park and ride facilities. And there, but that any increase at any individual location wouldn't be enough to result in adverse effects. So if you go to the next slide, I pulled out some additional information. So the environmental assessment did acknowledge that there is the potential that tolling would result in an increased parking demand in neighborhoods such as north of the toll zone, meaning the Upper East Side. However, the modeling that was performed for this showed that there would be a reduction in the number of vehicles entering the zone, and thus, as a result, there would be fewer vehicles that would be north of the boundary zone as well, so would not result in an increase in parking demands for those neighborhoods. Again, that's that goes, I think, beyond just that boundary zone area closest to the 60th Street toll zone. And then they said, if an increase in demand were to occur just north of 60th Street, that demand could be accommodated by existing parking. So whether it be existing off-street parking spaces available, or through adjustments in fees, so to essentially supply and demand, and using parking fees to help control demands, and that would result in an offset. If we could just go to the next slide, please, an offset in the demand for parking. So the EA acknowledged that the concerns that have been expressed by many at our meetings here on this task force regarding the potential for tax season for hire vehicle drop-offs to increase, along with demand for the existing limited on-street parking north of 60th Street. They found that that's unlikely to occur given the difficulty that already exists in finding parking, and that any increase that occurs will likely decrease over time because people then adjust to the new travel patterns and what would be the new condition with the tolling in place. So while there would be a potential temporary increase, it would eventually subside. And then they point to what I believe they refer to as rational theory, meaning that people would get frustrated with the idea, complexity, and the wasted time associated with trying to find parking, and as a result, it would be unlikely that people would rely on on-street parking for their regular parking needs in neighborhoods north of the boundary. And they say further that on-street parking is not a defining feature of the neighborhood character in the area, and therefore any limited changes that may occur would therefore not impact the neighborhood character. Next slide, and there are just, I think, 2 or 3 more. And then it highlighted the actual parking inventory. So again, between 60th and 65th Street, there are about 7,500 off-street spaces in 52 facilities, with typically they're at 70 to 80% of occupied. And then that's on both the east and west side. So about 3,800 spaces in 34 facilities are located east of Central Park, meaning here. And again, they talk about how it is unlikely that new off-street parking capacity would be added north of 60th Street because of a lack of available sites and decades-long trends regarding lower parking demand and higher real estate values that would discourage the development of new parking garages. And then there would be more parking available, unsurprisingly, south of the boundary in the toll zone, because there would be less demand for off-street parking. And then furthermore, next slide, please. With the tolling alternative, it was alluding to the fact that some people may change the place where they park so as not to have to worry about crossing over the boundary. I know we may want to touch upon this tonight. There is one garage at least where you enter on one side of the toll zone and exit in the other, and that would result in a tolling issue, or tolling being assessed. And then we've spoken about before on the last bullet point here about the fact that zoning doesn't require most developments in our neighborhood to include off-street parking, and that is something that we've talked about, whether it should be reconsidered or not. I'm not sure if that's something that this task force can fully work through, but I know that the Zoning and Development Committee of Community Board 8 was looking to revisit that issue. And we can go on to the next one, and this is the final slide. So basically their findings were any changes in driving behavior and access to parking would not adversely affect the defining features of the neighborhood character, as we discussed. And then because new parking garages aren't likely to be developed in place of existing uses, there would be no change in the mixed use nature and established land use patterns and densities that are defining features of the neighborhood character. Any increase in demand for parking would not affect well, I think I'm being repetitive there by saying that. And essentially, yeah, so that was all neighborhood character things, and I think I've touched upon that. So again, it's not as if this went into great extensive detail about it, but the gist of what the environmental assessment found is that they don't believe that there are going to be major parking issues. That being said, I think we've clearly discussed the concerns that exist in this community, and in the past, we've talked about different issues that have been raised. Certainly people have discussed their concerns about people parking near the boundary and then either taking the subway or even walking over to the other side. And then there have been suggestions as well that that could be an issue at other subway stations, not on the boundary itself, but further north. I think we heard from Community Board 11's chair saying that they're already having what they perceive as a challenge in terms of people coming from outside their community and parking there. So that's something we've talked about in the past. So some of the potential ideas that we've discussed include the idea of municipal parking in outer boroughs near subway stations. Some people have raised the concept of a residential parking permit program in neighborhoods outside the congestion zone. Again, that's a larger topic that may go well beyond anything that we could recommend. So we may want to, if we are thinking about something like that, we may have to think about it in the broader context of what it would mean beyond just in the congestion boundary zone area. As I mentioned, some people have suggested revisiting zoning policies. Then there's always the question as well as to whether the existing on-street parking regulations are appropriate or if they need to be changed in order to address any potential concerns regarding congestion pricing. So as I think many of you know, at least close to the boundary, there is not a lot of on-street parking availability because many spaces are commercial loading on most weekdays. Once you get further north into the district, you have much more alternate side parking, general parking availability. Perhaps some people may want to think about whether any of those general rules should be modified to address concerns regarding people parking near subway stations. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I missed in terms of different ideas that have been raised before, but that's just a general overview, and I apologize. I feel like I'm rambling and wasn't as well prepared as I have been in the past. It's been a long day, but I hope that's at least a starting point for us to have a discussion.
I'd like to also note before we look for before we hear comments or questions that in London, before they implemented their congestion pricing scheme, the city had not only purchased 300 buses, but had created 8,000 parking spaces, anticipating an increased demand for parking just outside of the zone. So having said that, let's turn first to the public and then we'll go to the board. So the only person from the public whose hand is raised at this time, Leah Hanlon. Saida, if you could unmute Leah.
I think I'm unmuted. My question will be brief because I have COVID.
I hope you feel better.
Thank you. It's really just an observation. Over recent months, all of the parking garages in my neighborhood, which is 79th Street, are full, and there is not even transient parking available. They all have signs in front of them that there's no daytime parking. So there's not a whole lot of capacity. That's my only point.
Thank you. And how far east are you on 79th Street?
Between First and Second.
So you're not even next to the subways directly next
I
to it.
am not.
Okay. Thank you. All right, then let's turn to the board. I don't see anyone else from the public. We'll start with Ed, Michelle, and then Judy.
Thanks, Alita. I won't go on. I've said these things before. I think the slides bear out the points I've raised before. These EAs, I don't have it in front of me, but you've heard me say this before at meetings. The double talk and triplicate coming out of the MTA is suffocating. I won't go chapter and verse, like I said, through the slides. But it suits them on one hand, it suits them another way, another time. As to this parking in the zone, out of the zone, I am concerned and continue to be concerned about the unintended consequences of this and the money and just the overall funding of this. I think it's ill-conceived. I think this EA makes it even more abundantly clear that it is. They're just grasping at straws, anything they can to justify it. But to say that there's no adverse impact, to the previous speaker, I mean, it just flies in the face of anybody who walks around these neighborhoods or drives a car. And I just, I shake my head, and the regressivity of this is shocking. Anyway, that's all. I won't go on a jag, but it just, for the record, just again, my objections all around, and nothing against you, Craig. You're just the messenger for this, but it's, please, good Lord, I feel like I'm back on York Avenue again. It's 440 East 62nd Street all over again. Okay, thanks, Alita. Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, Ed. I did note that their use of the words likely is means it's unpredictable. Okay. Thanks, Ed. Michelle? Oh, you know what? There is someone, if you wouldn't mind, Michelle, there is someone who looks like they're from the public. They only have a phone number. Saida, if you could unmute the person, and if you could identify yourself, please.
Yes, it's Evelyn David. I don't know why, when I register, I put my name with this. I don't know why my name's not coming up with the number.
That's okay. You can be renamed. Oh, you are just renamed. Thank you, Evelyn.
Okay, thank you. I just read an article in the New York Times. Hope's fading as offices continue to sit empty. So where they think they're getting all these people coming in and paying all this money, that's one side of the issue. Maybe they're right. There'll be less cars coming in because nobody wants to go to work or to drive into Manhattan. With a $23 toll on top of their parking fees, that would be like, it's getting to be extraordinarily expensive. Anybody from New Jersey, anybody coming over the GW, that's $36 a day just to get into Manhattan if you go in the zone, and then they have to park. So that's one side of this. But that article, Hope's fading as offices continue to sit empty, that's a whole tax issue, right? And that just goes to blowing away their entire theory of they're going to make all this money. Having said all of this, I don't know who did this report. The existing parking, people will take existing parking. There is no existing parking. No offset, no effect. That's ridiculous. That's absurd. Your first speaker from the board, he's completely correct. There will be consequences unforeseen, total pollution, huge traffic jams. I mean, I feel sorry for everybody right now. Right now, I feel sorry for everybody. And it's a political move right now during during what is, people are saying we're going into a recession or we're not. We have, back and forth, and things are really unstable right now. They should just put this on the slide. That's what I think. And politically speaking, this is a huge issue. I mean, I listened to the MTA people. I was number 300 on that first meeting when we were allowed to talk. 90%, 95% of the people talking were completely against this. And the poor people that live in the zone, this is not London, okay? New York City people are not being listened to at all by the MTA. Londoners wouldn't have taken this for 2 seconds. So, I mean, at least London came up with 1,000 parking spots. So anyway, thank you for all this information and all this work. And I'm hoping that the board has listened and is going to come up with, just throw it back at them. I mean, it's ridiculous. Their environmental plan, that's ridiculous. They completely missed the whole thing. You can't find a park. No. Things are packed jammed already. Okay. So anyway, thank you very much for listening and for allowing us to speak and, voice our incredible concerns. I'm trying not to panic, but, I live here, so maybe we should all get parking passes. And then we can just keep our cars on the street, and that's the end of it. I mean, you could do that. We could do that. That would be not a very nice thing to do, but even workers could get parking passes. I mean, you could apply for them and get them if you have legitimate reasons to have your car is there and you're not going to move it and you're not giving it to somebody from the outer boroughs. I don't know. That's terrible. I don't know. Whatever's fair. And we have to protect ourselves now because they're ruthless. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Evelyn. Okay, Michelle, Judy, and then Cause.
Thank you. Firstly, remember that anybody who does the EAS, that it's the entity that wants to implement the program. So there's a bias built into this. I don't know. Was anybody buying this reasoning? This reasoning would have failed any philosophy course that anybody would have offered. It was absolutely ridiculous. Basically saying that you won't need parking because people won't come in, or they might change their minds about coming in, or they'll get used to the process. I mean, it was silliness. The whole thing was silliness. But here's the basic thing. More and more things are coming to the streets that are going to take the parking. The electric vehicle charging, the rent-a-cars, the rent-a-trucks, everything is going to take parking. I would like them to consider their zoning change that happened a few years ago, not demanding parking in new residential buildings. I think that was ludicrous in light of what's going on. But having said all that, what are we going to do about this? The truth of the matter is, this committee might as well pack up and go home. There was a resolution that was never sent, was never voted on by the full board, and was never sent to the powers that be. In that resolution, the committee outlined what it thought could be helpful. It was tabled, as you all well know. So now, rather than complaining, because to me this is a complete disaster, and I can foresee additional concerns, the whole Midtown redevelopment project is now on hold. Vernato has pulled out and isn't even going through with it. So to speak to Leia's comments, which office workers are coming in to support this potential revenue stream anyway? The whole thing is this: what are we going to do about it? Okay, we have meetings, we're voicing our concerns, the public is, that's all great. But the one opportunity that we had to do something about it, we did not. So I would like the committee to please tell me, the chairs, what's the plan here? What's the position of Community Board 8, and what is it that we are going to be doing about this? Because it is not even on the record whether or not we are for it or against it. Other community boards have taken firm stands.
No, they
We
have
have
not,
not.
Michelle. We are the only community board that actually is actively looking at congestion pricing. I've spoken to 4 different community boards about this, and no one else has a task force. Committees are barely looking at it. They are just starting.
My understanding,
it.
Alito, didn't Community Board 11 have a resolution in opposition?
I believe they did.
They
Yes,
did, but
they
they
did.
are not, they're
Well-
not, they're not looking at it in the detail that we are.
Well, we're
Last
looking
month-
at it and looking at it and looking at it, but we'd have no position. And I think that is very key.
Actually, the board voted in favor, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Michelle, it's not excusable, but
Go ahead.
there was a resolution of
Not-
not opposing it, I think in 2000, was it 19 maybe? But we are examining it piece by piece. So rather than object to the whole thing, last month we had a lengthy resolution on disability. We're hoping this month, if people are interested, to have a resolution on the parking issues. Next month, we'll look at something else, and that's how we are. examining it.
Yeah,
And
I
next
got
month-
that.
and
Having
next
been
month-
at every meeting, including
know.
whatever happened in 2019, I am well aware of the history here. What I'm saying is we are not taking a firm stand. Now that's on purpose. I'm not saying it's not on purpose. What I'm saying is this EAS that was conducted was nonsense, as most of them are, because they're conducted by, either the applicant in some cases, or the agency that's trying to put this forward. So to me, I discount that. And if you can say that there's no consequence here, there's no impact, that's ludicrous on the face of it. So you can't show me a study that's going to prove that, nor have they attempted to. The bottom line is, going forward, I'm happy to go along with your piece by piece. We'll talk about garages tonight, and we'll probably come up with something that we would like more parking spots. We'll do that. But this is not addressing the seriousness and how consequential this program is going to be. Part of that reason is because the board is divided. Many people on the board do not have concerns about its negative impact, but have put all their eggs in the basket that it will affect us all positively, for whatever their reasons are. So we have not come to a consensus. And I recognize, Alita, that is the reason we're doing it bit by bit by bit. But that everything we're doing bit by bit presumes that it's happening. And nowhere in our resolutions does it give as a whereas that we do not want it to happen, but if it does, this is what we presume. And the reason we don't put that in is we have people who will not agree with that. Here's my final comment. I do not believe in this, as in many issues, that the community board necessarily represents the majority of the actual residents and businesses in the community. And I wish there was a way. It's not easy from a task force, from a number of people that you need, from protocol, to actually get a reading, to do our own canvassing, house by house, block by block, of who is for this and who is against it. I'm happy to rattle and think of how we could do that in a practical way. But I recognize that from a manpower point of view and access to individuals and businesses, it's difficult. But maybe each committee, for whoever they have access to, can poll them. But we're not getting a representation of the real community here. And I'm assuming it's because it's Thanksgiving week, but because this is such an important topic, I'm shocked at the number of at the participation. I'm sure the week has something to do with it, but whatever. Anyway, that's what I have to say. I want to see it more seriously addressed and more forcefully. Thank you very much. And thank you for the jobs that you're doing. I recognize I'm not blaming you, but I'm just saying we're spinning our wheels. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
you.
If I could just comment on a few things. None of us were thrilled with this date being the only date that we had available in the entire month of November to be able to have this meeting. I would hope that our next meeting date will be at a better time. Although
December
December's
24th.
exactly. December, as we also know, is a very difficult time to hold meetings and to be able to attract the community to participate in meetings. So we had to settle for this just as a result of lack of options. We all know how many different committees there are that are trying to hold meetings. So
And well,
that's
holidays in November too. So there are at
yes,
least 4 days that the board's not meeting. And
right.
it's state
Yeah.
holidays. So.
On other months, it's not close to 4 days generally. Second, I think, and maybe I should have been a little more clear when talking about impacts. Obviously, there are always going to be impacts from any project. An environmental assessment or any type of environmental review is looking at it from a broader perspective and talking about community-wide impacts or impacts to certain groups of populations or stakeholders, if you will. So I don't think anyone is suggesting that this is not going to have any adverse impacts to individuals for sure, and maybe even certain groups to some extent. But I think in the context of what an environmental assessment is supposed to generate, it's saying that that on the whole, this isn't going to result in adverse impacts from an environmental standpoint. So they talk about whether it be community impacts, environmental quality, different demographic groups. And when there are possible impacts, they do point it out. They just overall came to the conclusion that it was not going to result in any adverse impacts. And I think you're right to some extent for sure that environmental reviews, because they're funded by the entity that is proposing the project, there's always going to be that potential for bias in there. On the flip side, there's so much scrutiny when it comes to this project. I don't know whether it would result in that level of miscasting the impacts and the findings, because I think people would jump at the opportunity to attack that. So I just wanted to make that point clear. And then in general response to what type of resolution or statement that this task force and this board has made, I'll just repeat. I understand that there is a divide, and that there have been obviously these attempts to pass resolutions at the board level, and numerous times that didn't succeed. And I think we've all, maybe everyone doesn't agree with it, but the decision's been made that we're now going to try to be focused on these individual topics and try to hopefully have results similar to what we had last month. And I sometimes struggle with the content of these meetings or the outcomes of these meetings. And I was generally extremely pleased with how we were able to not only pass a meaningful resolution last month, but a unanimous resolution. And I think this is a difficult topic, and I don't know that there's no way to ever know whether a community board is truly representing a cross-section of the community, because the community board and people who tend to attend community board meetings usually do so because they have specific reasons that they want to be involved or specific issues that they want to speak about. And I always am of the belief that, yeah, everyone's here on the board appointed for a reason, but the community at large, it's hard to ever know that if you're going to have a representative cross section and if there's a silent majority that views things a different way. it would be great if we could do polling and try and get some statistically significant results that really were able to match up with the community at large in terms of its demographics and population and the people who live and work here and their views on congestion pricing. That's also a very expensive proposition that certainly we don't have the money as a community board to fund. Maybe you can see if any elected officials wish to do that, but I think that's really hard to do as well. So we're left here to try to do the best that we can to try to see what productive outcomes we can generate that hopefully, even if it's not attacking the broader issue, are attacking issues that do have impacts to certain people. In this case, parking, and even if it's as minor as making recommendations to DOT about parking regulations that need to be changed in order to accommodate congestion pricing, even if it's on a specific block, that's still something tangible. And I think we should, I understand those who are frustrated that we're not making a much more pronounced statement, but incrementalism is not necessarily a bad thing. So I just want to, I'm sorry I went on for so long, but I thought it was important just to try to put that perspective in place.
I'd like to note something. When I was researching today whether there had been any updates, I saw something. I don't know when it was and who it was by and in what paper I saw it. There are lots of obviously articles written over the last number of years, but there was a call for the MTA to put it on the ballot somehow, or to get a vote and actually take it to the public to see whether the public approves it or not. I don't know whether that's going to happen. I also just would like to note from a different perspective that in the EAS, when they're talking about high density as being a defining character of the neighborhood, that there are plenty of people who object to the high density that we're already having and would prefer that it not be a defining characteristic of the neighborhood. So, and that is how the community has expressed it at various community board and committee meetings. So having said that, I hope, I think, Craig, and I hope the board members don't mind that there are now 3 new people from the public that have raised their hands. If we could just zigzag back to the public and then to the board again, and then we'll do that. And Ed, I know, has raised his hand again, and that's fine. So we'll go to Erica Burson, Andrew Fine, and then Boaz Galil. Saida, if you would unmute them, please. Thank you.
Hi, Alita. Happy
Hey, Erica.
Thanksgiving. Sorry, I'm not on video. I just got back from a trip. It's hard to believe, but I've been involved with this board now for almost 2 years since I moved from the Upper West to the Upper East Side. And it's really starting to sound a lot like the New York Blood Center, in that there's hours and hours and hours and hours spent on it. And while I think the position of the board was a little bit different because people seem to be in agreement, how long is this going to continue going around in committee until, some kind of decision is made here? Because from what I've seen in the circles that I'm running in with people that know Hochul directly, that were out campaigning for her, that are close family friends of ours, this is a done deal.
Well,
so the MTA may be saying something, the vendors may be saying something, but I'm hearing, from first relationship circles that this is a done deal. And I'm afraid that if community boards aren't taking positions on this, at least for the record, that's a misstep. And Craig, I would also say that while not cheap or inexpensive, you can actually buy neighborhood data and get things in the mail to people and do an anecdotal survey. It doesn't have to be a professional like polling company like they do with polling in politics, but I field surveys and in my professional life through these companies all the time. So I don't know what kind of budget boards have in order to do this stuff, but there are hundreds of companies that you can actually get all the data for Community Board 8 to send mailers out. Because you're right, when you say that, when there are people who boast that they've been on the board for 30 years, I don't think that is representative of the larger community at this point. So I guess it's just twofold. My statement is you can field surveys, anecdotal surveys pretty easily in a community. But also, Alita, I want to know, like, what's going to happen with this? Is this going to be like hours and hours and hours again? Or is there some kind of timeline to get the board to take a position on this?
You know, we are doing what we possibly can to have any kind of influence. We ask that there be Manhattan representatives on the Transit Mobility Review Board. There are not. We asked for
Right.
transparency in how they were selected. They are all somehow connected with the MTA and the MTA's board. We asked that the Transit Mobility Review Board comply with the open meetings law. I don't know what's happening with that.
That's why, I mean, I'm pretty sure this is going forward.
Well, it may be, and that's why, if it is going forward, it makes sense to try and have an influence over the specific mechanisms, the specific details of implementation. As they say, the devil's in the details. And if we could influence the way they look at people with disabilities, which is what we put in detail last month, if we could influence the way they look at parking issues, despite their wishy-washy EAS on the issue of parking. If there is a resolution today, then maybe that has some kind of impact. If there are other ways of having impact, I think New Jersey, I'm not sure if New Jersey is filing a suit about this or not.
They are.
But
They are.
but if we could have any kind of influence over anything that they're doing in favor of the community, that's what we're trying to do. Because if they are full steam ahead, and they're looking at creating and drafting rules, then maybe it makes sense to have the approach of looking at specific rules to try.
I'd also like to include, and I agree with that. I also would like to include, though, that I live on 71st Street, or even if somebody lives on 86th Street, we shouldn't be penalized for those of us who absolutely need to get around other than the buses and subways. I don't own a car. I have no interest in owning a car, but I do use stuff like that because of my health, and I shouldn't be penalized going 11 blocks south.
Right. Well, that's an issue, I guess, either an overall issue or something that we could look at specifically in another month. For this month, though, if we want to have any kind of resolution on parking or parking regulations or on-street parking issues, anything else, then we need to focus on that so we can include specific points and have a variety or a number and go into detail in the resolution as we did on the disability issues.
Yeah, I mean, I lived in DC for many years and we had parking permits where I live for the street.
Well, that's something to discuss too. Is that something that, let's start with this then, and I would ask if everyone whose hand is raised could focus on the parking. That's something that you would recommend, having lived in an area that had parking restrictions, that there be a residential permit parking.
And it worked. We got one for one car and a guest.
You mean another car too? You had permits for 2 cars. Is that what you mean?
No, a guest spot. You got a guest permit. So if your guests come visit you, you had a guest permit.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Is there anything else before we go to Andrew?
No, thanks. I appreciate it. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thanks. Same to you.
Thank you.
Andrew?
Hi, everybody. Apologies for my tardiness and happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. To Michelle's point on there being so little participation in this call, I'd like to point to the fact that we had a very large call about a month or 2 months ago, where we spent 3 or 4 hours to resolve that we were opposed to congestion pricing. And, it was a waste of people's time. We spent 3 or 4 hours, and incredibly, our participation in the community board was ignored by the community board. We were totally shut out. We were tabled and thrown back and stonewalled, frankly. In terms of the environmental impact, and there were so many parts of this report that said there would be no impact. And anybody that thinks that you can build a wall on 60th Street or 59th Street, it's going to cost $23 to climb over or go through. It's just seriously detached from reality. Think about it. If you had a $20 toll to go beyond 59th Street on the subway, how many people would get off the subway and get on a bus? I mean, this is just reality. It's economics. There are very few people to whom $20 or $23 to pass a random border means nothing and is inconsequential. In terms of parking, if we're gonna live with congestion pricing, we have to basically ban.
You cut out, Andrew.
You froze. Andrew?
We all want to know what you want to ban, but we didn't hear.
I would suggest maybe turning off your video and trying again, but we can go to the next person in the meantime. Boaz?
There he is.
He's back.
You froze, Andrew, so we didn't hear. Like
where did I freeze?
You say we should ban, and then you went.
I was just saying that we should ban out of state and out of district, out of neighborhood cars from parking on side streets if, in fact, we have congestion pricing moving forward. It's unfair to local residents and taxpayers that out of state or out of town, out of neighborhood people can just use our neighborhood as a parking lot in order to avoid a $20 to $23 toll to cross 59th Street. Of course, as you know, I am vehemently opposed to congestion pricing. I think it's anti-family, anti-elderly, and anti-disability. And I'm so sorry that our community board, underlying community, ignored what we came up with as a community board, or community board plus public members a month and a half ago. And that's my comment. I mean, again, I think it's all idiotic, but if we're going to go through with it, we have to have parking for local residents and for nobody else. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Let's go to Boaz.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, perfect. I will make it quick. So first thing regarding Michelle's comment, I think that this should be an important question for every committee in the community board. What is the goal? What actually the community board can do? And just like last year in December, you can go back to the recording. Last year there was a board meeting in 2021. I asked, I got my 1 minute, and I asked basically if I can get like a spread, executive page of what did the community board achieved or influence or whatever in that year, and I never got it, and I hope that this year you guys will give us something. What did the community board achieve, or what influence did the community board have done? I think it's very important because that's how you bring more people to the community board. That's a side comment. The second, regarding the congestion price, I think that first of all, there is still time. I mean, you guys can fight it because they didn't close the budget. The congestion, forget about the environmental, what you guys are talking about. It's all about closing a gap in the budget. MTA basically ran out of money, and they need X amount of money. So they are doing it through the tax of people, basically adding tax for the people that own cars. Nothing is closed. I mean, I think that there is still time. They have to close it by, I think that by beginning of coming year. So there is still time. What I think that the community board needs to do, I mean, that's the funny thing. I hear what Andrew was saying. I hear what Ed is saying. I usually agree with what they have to say, but over here, I think that this is their mistake. They basically, you have two small teams, too small percentage of population Upper East Side. The car owners, it's like 25, 30% of the resident community board, they own a car, and you have another group that have a strong activist, the bicycle, the guys that basically take their bicycle every day to work. We're talking about another, I don't know, less than 1%. The majority of the population of Upper East Side are residents like myself, that basically pay for a market rent, and basically they don't own a car. They have a family, I have a kid, we use the bus, use the train, and so on. You guys should actually come to this majority of the population and team up with them against the congestion price. Why everyone in community board, all the residents need to fight the congestion price is because it doesn't make sense. Why doesn't it make sense? Right now, it's not safe using the public transportation, either the subway or the buses. And you guys, every group is talking about, the Andrew Fine is talking about his friend, his family, about the car. There is another guy, activist from the bikes, is that talking about the guys, but you forgot a huge population. Now, if you included that huge population about the ones that don't own a car, and basically say, listen, this tax doesn't make sense. I mean, the subway is broken. We could all team together and fight against this tax. And I think that there is still time, by the way. Instead of pointing fingers and joining the Zoom and we have the cyclist activists, we should all team and basically say, listen, the public safety, something is broken, it's not safe. First of all, before adding more tax, we want to bring back sanity, fix the subway so it will be safe to use the subway. We don't want to, it's like, it's crazy what's going on in the subway. Fix the enforcement on the buses so everyone will pay their share. Let's enforce the current rules and then let's talk about additional tax. That's one. The second comment, I think that what the community board needs to think about is, okay, there is a gap in the budget. Let's say that we are dropping the congestion tax. We need to figure out what is the alternative. Where is the budget? How they can close the gap? Look at the data, how much they are going to rise, and then close and figure it. Give them an ideas about how they can close the gap. Regarding the parking, what they've been doing, in Long Island, in every place, is that they have like a resident sticker where only resident can park in that area. So whoever lives in Upper East Side and have a car and stay should get a sticker, and it should have the priority, or basically the only one that allowed to use Upper East Side parking. Thank you very much. And I just want to close. There is still time. But like Michelle saying, listen, you guys lost the momentum. You guys had a lot of people. You fought. You created a lot of fights inside the community instead of uniting everyone to fight against this tax. And this money is eventually, no one will see the benefits. People, I hear they're saying that they will fix the elevator. No one will see it's crazy to see what's going on right now on the subway. It's like it's not safe. And first of all, they need to add another layer of fix, the current enforcement, and then move forward. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's go. I don't see anyone else from the public. Andrew, has raised his hand again, but let's go to the board members who haven't spoken before we go back to you, Andrew. So that would be Judy and Kaz right now.
Good evening, Alita and Craig. I think you're both doing a good job. My own personal opinion is that we need each meeting to come up with a resolution, even if it's one little piece of the problem, and go to it. First, my question to you, Craig, is that study you refer to about no effect on the parking. When was the study actually done? Is there a date on that?
So this is the environmental assessment and
Yes,
yeah,
when was
right.
it done?
And I don't recall offhand. I would have to dig to look to see when they did the when they did the parking inventory.
21, 20, 22?
It was somewhere in the 21, 22 range, because I don't think they began work on the environmental
Well,
assessment.
I'm
before
sure
that.
that study does not include the 2 garages that we lost, the one across the street from us, which is now the Browning School, and the one on 65th Street, which is also going to be a school. And I would say between the 2 garages, we probably lost 500 parking spaces. So therefore, I would say, if we are going to pass a resolution, that we need to bring to their attention on parking that their survey, their study that they did may, number one, be out of date, because some of the garages they count as parking spaces no longer exist. Okay, that's my first thing for a resolution. Secondly, as you know, if it's not this meeting, fine, I'll move on. But I do want to discuss the 59th Street Bridge. And what happens with that, and the tolling and so on. So if this is not the meeting, we're talking about parking. Can we please put that on your list for a future meeting?
So next meeting, I was going to say this before, next meeting, Alita and I agreed on will deal with 2 issues. One would be issues regarding the boundary zone. And I think the bridge would fall into that, because clearly the bridge is the central player in that. And the other is because we've heard a lot of comments regarding the topic, oversight and accountability of congestion pricing and how revenues are spent and
Accounted for.
Accounted for. Well,
And
that
whether the
sounds
MTA is going to be held accountable in any way,
Okay,
how to
so
ensure that
now-
money and that stuff, Judy, sorry.
Yeah, okay. So that all sounds good for the next meeting, but let's pass a resolution tonight. But now I want to know about the people who live on 60th Street, you know, who really get done in by this. Maybe they're called maybe 60th, 61st, maybe 62nd. Maybe those people, parking passes for those streets or something, because they go around the corner from 61st where their garage is between First and York, and they come around to 60th Street side, and now all of a sudden it's a toll. So I think we need in our resolution to have some kind of exclusion for the street, at least the street, if not the 2 streets, where the toll actually starts. Because those people are really put in an unfair burden, or give them some kind of street parking passes or something. But we need to consider that in the parking resolution. That's all that I have.
Thank you, Judy. And I'm sensing a theme here from speakers that there seems to be certainly interest in some sort of residential parking permit program to some extent. And before I think where I'm headed here is, and I'm just trying to, I don't want to even say devil's advocate, because I want to try to acknowledge both sides of the issue here. So obviously we all understand what the potential benefits of a residential parking program are. And if it works, we all understand how that can help mitigate some of the concerns that some of the impacts that people are concerned about. From the flip side of it, it is well known that in the past, and that's not to say the current administration, but in the past, New York City DOT was very much opposed to residential parking programs because they viewed it as an administrative nightmare to have to try to implement and administer. And they were always afraid of doing that. Now, that being said, my understanding is that the current DOT commissioner, Adonis Rodriguez, is someone who in the past has supported residential parking permit programs. So there is some opportunity there perhaps for those who are interested in pursuing this. The other issues that I think often are raised when it comes to these are the fact that whether you try to prohibit certain groups, whether it be based off of license plates or driver's license registration or some other factor, is how do you implement it in a way where you're not adversely impacting people who may not live here, but are conducting business here or who have very valid reasons who are here, rather than trying to avoid a congestion pricing toll. So for example, whether it's a home health aid, whether it's crews who are doing construction on residential apartments, whether it be doormen and building staff that may live in places outside of New York City or even New York State. There are many examples of people that if you exclude them, are going to be impacted adversely, and it could trickle down to people who actually live and work here, or even people who live outside the district but own a business here. So that's a concern that's been raised. And then there's also the fact that because we are such a densely populated area, that you'd have to find a way of, just because there are residential parking programs in place doesn't mean that people are going to be guaranteed parking or have any less difficulty finding parking than they currently do. So where I guess what I'm wondering whether it could be just a good way of doing something here is whether, if this committee wanted to perhaps suggest that a pilot program be rolled out in some area, perhaps near the boundary or somewhere where it would actually perhaps have an impact when in regards to congestion pricing, to allow us to assess whether such a program could actually work and produce benefits to our community. I'm not proposing that. I'm just saying that may be a way to do this, because I think there are a lot of questions out there and there may not be unanimous support for it by any means, but it could be a way of at least testing the waters.
Well, I just want to throw this in there too. In addition to people who may work, they have, as you said, construction. Maybe they're teachers that live in transit deserts or outside the city, doormen, other people maybe who work in the supermarkets, whatever it is, that's something that people should discuss. And also the idea that that it's not just the boundary area. If we're thinking, and again, there's statements by the chair of CB8M about this up in around 125th Street or elsewhere, is that I don't think we could or should foreclose the idea that there may be additional demand for parking around 86th Street because it's an express subway stop. And people may think that, oh, it'll be really congested around 60th Street and that East 86th Street may be less so. So I think that's something that should be discussed as well. So let's go back to.
Oh, Lita, since this was my question, I think that if we're going to, I don't know that it's parking passes. I don't know how you want to word it, but there's no reason why we can't word it, not just the people who live there, who work there, who teach there, whatever it is, we can put that into our resolution. Yes. and specify that. But I think we have to do something for the people at the border And I don't know, maybe as you say, 86, 72nd, I don't know, maybe the main streets also need something else also to be done for them. But if we're going to start discussing a resolution, I think we should be specific and start discussing these ideas that we may do. I think to pass no resolution and do nothing, we are not doing our job.
Thank you, Judy. Okay, well, let's go to cause and then everyone else, except for, let's go to cause and then Mohit, and then everyone else will have already spoken once. So if we could do that, Saida. And,
Yeah,
and let's focus on parking, please.
yeah,
Did-
I'm unmuted. Thanks, Alida. Let's not kid ourselves. We all know it's a done deal. We all know it's going to be coming, whether we like it or not. We can write, million resolutions. They're not going to be heard. It's a done deal. With parking, we all know the current situation with the abuse of the parking placards that are in place now. So if we're introducing another parking placard for the residents, we all know it's going to be abused, and we all know there's going to be no enforcement. Enforcement is lacking in everywhere. Funding. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a certain amount that they're expecting for the congestion pricing, so many millions on a yearly basis. Is that correct?
$1 billion a year to be able to, I suppose, support $15 billion in bonds.
Okay, so let's say in a year you get 1 billion cars, that's $1 per car. Let's assume the second year you're going to have half that amount of cars. Does that mean that the price doubles?
Well, I think that's
if they're guaranteed 1 billion, they're gonna get that 1 billion regardless of how many cars, whether it's one car or 1 billion cars. So the less cars that come in, the more that every other car is going to have to pay. Is that correct?
Well, I guess typically what happens here is you don't continue to see a downward trend. Once the initial decline occurs, it usually levels off. So I think the projections have always been that I forget what the precise percentage is in terms of the reduction in vehicles that would be crossing into the toll zone, but it's less than 20%. I forget what the number is. But
well, regardless of what it is, the first year that you're going to have so many cars, everybody's going to be paying. If they get over that amount, what happens to the excess that they collect the first year?
Yeah,
do we get it back, or do they put it in their slush fund?
I
Did
don't
you answer
know.
your own question?
Yeah, well, sorry about that. The other one, I mean, if I continually ride the bus or take the subway, I'm voting for this regardless, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. So if I'm strictly a public transport person, I'm going to vote this. I'm going to tell everybody what a great idea this is. But if I have a car, I ride a taxi, I take an Uber or something, I'm affected regardless. So, that's another thing. Bicycles and scooters, they contribute to the congestion, don't they? They're going to be excluded?
Well, those are all questions to be raised. I guess when we're talking about general exclusions, maybe those are issues. There have been people who've talked about exclusions for motorcycles too, for instance, but we should try and, if we could, in order to be most effective, have as comprehensive, if we're going to have one at all, resolution on the parking issues.
Okay. Yeah, okay, that's all. But, let's not kid ourselves. It's a done deal regardless of what we say and what we do. So theoretically, we should agree to it, but with the following restrictions, and really, really hone down on the restrictions. If we vote no, they're going to say, well, you voted no, you've got no say. But if we agree with the resolution, with whatever we feel should be looked at and changed and modified and enhanced and taken away, then we have a better chance of being heard. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Mohit?
All right, I'm gonna turn you down.
I think Ed was next, Alita.
But
Ed
Ed
has already
already
spoken,
spoke, so
so-
if we could go to Mohit, who hasn't spoken yet.
Okay.
Thanks, Ed.
Hey,
Okay.
yeah, sorry, Ed. Thanks, guys. Can I introduce a resolution?
Yes?
Okay, it'll be in 3 parts, which is short for me. So part,
You have it written out?
I don't. I am rocking my baby to sleep. I apologize.
I will try to, I will try to write it down.
They're short-ish. All right, part 1, the MTA and or NYC DOT, hard for me to say which one's responsible here, but the responsible state or federal agency shall keep track of parking use and demand and availability in CB8 and shall report on that to the board annually. So I think that's similar to something we've said before, but that's part A. Part B is that the community board believes that it's important to maintain availability of parking, garage and or street for residents and people who work in the community district. And so we need the MTA to measure demand, availability of parking for that class of individuals. So maybe some kind of ratio of parking spots, garage and or street spots relative to number of cars for people who are registered to live in the community district or something. But we need the MTA to measure that number and then come back to us with plans to maintain parking availability no worse than it is today if that number starts to deteriorate post the implementation of congestion pricing. So it's related to the first one, but requires the MTA to take affirmative action. And then part C, in response to Judy, is that the MTA needs to have a plan in place for exempting from tolls individuals who park in a garage and then have no choice but to exit through the garage into the CBD, even if they're going northward. And it's going to be challenging to figure out how to do that, but I think it's clear that there are some garages in our district which will have this problem because they either enter on 61st, exit on 60th, or they exit onto a southbound avenue. And so those are the 3 parts, and that's quite verbose. But I think that what I'm trying to do here is address some of the different strands of thought here that we've had this evening.
Okay, so thank you. But the lawyer in me asks you for part A, when would you start measuring the parking? When and if there's congestion pricing, or as of tomorrow or some other time?
I mean, I would say as of 2017, maybe. But no, I mean, it should be as of, say, January 1, 2023.
Wait, can you just repeat part 1 again?
Yeah, so part 1 is a measurement clause. So the MTA shall measure the availability and use of parking in the community district.
Okay.
And then the second clause is different because it's specific to the availability of parking for people who live or work in the district. And I don't know how to do that. That's going to be maybe some kind of ratio of people, of number of cars registered in this area divided by garage spots or something. But there needs to be some way of measuring demand for parking, or excuse me, availability for parking for people who live and or work on the Upper East. And we want to make sure that people can park their cars if they choose to have one, because they want.
Does anyone object if I just ask or ask maybe a clarifying question, which is that in the EAS, the MTA noted that if parking garage fees go up to accommodate or to account for more parking demand, so be it. I don't know if that's anything that is of interest to anybody else. And is there a second? I guess I should have asked this first. Is there a second to the motion?
Is there?
I
I see Judy.
Judy
Judy, give a thumbs up.
I think that was Judy.
Yeah, and I would have done that also, so.
Okay. Okay, so is there anything, since it was seconded, do you want to speak to it in any way, Mohit, before we go back to the everyone else?
I think I said my piece, except for just one really quick thing on your question, Alita, about pricing for garages. So, like if the prices in CB8 increase more than they do in a community district that doesn't, that isn't adjacent to the boundary, then that tells me that there has been, an increase in demand for parking here. And so that's one reason I kind of wanted, so that I think that's a relevant metric if we want to put that in. And I think the other relevant metric would be some kind of ratio for number of cars registered in the Upper East versus garage spots available or something along those lines. But I think both of those are ways of kind of measuring relative demand or relative availability of parking for residents and making sure that things just don't get worse moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask a question quickly? Did you want to actually add something like that to that second points where in terms of tracking, it would include the tracking of garage rates?
Yeah, that's fine with me. That's fine with me, yeah. And compare that to garage rates in other parts of the city, so we have a sense of how things are changing.
Okay.
And I know that was a meandering thing. I don't know, Craig, if you have a cleaner version of that. And once I get back to my laptop in 5 or 10 minutes, I can try to write something down, but happy to answer.
I have the gist of it. I'm not sure that I got it perfectly, but I think we have hopefully enough to work with.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Let's see who is next.
We have a raised hand from Erica Burson, member of the public.
All right, I think she already spoke also. So if we're going back to the public, I just wanted to go in order.
Okay.
Of those.
I think everyone's already spoken, Craig.
Yes, I think everyone's already spoken. So should we go back to the public and in the order that I see the, well, I guess
Yes.
Erica. Well, Andrew and then it would be.
Kaz actually is saying that he needs info on part of the resolution if we want to go to him.
Yeah, let's do that. All right.
That's fine.
Yeah, on the part A, I think you said parking in Community Board 8. I mean, this affects the whole of Manhattan. Should we specifically say CB8 or Manhattan on your first part of the resolution?
You mean about the assessing parking?
Right. Yeah, whatever part A was. Specifically mentioned Community Board 8.
So that brings me to a question as well, which is
Wait, what?
I'm not sure if Mohit is still unmuted.
Let's unmute him so he could respond if it's his resolution.
Yeah.
I'm totally open to expanding it more broadly. No question from me. I just don't want to pass a resolution that's considered, infringing on other community boards.
And the other question I have on a related note is, at what point does it become an overwhelming amount of work, considering that to some extent the environmental assessment already did an inventory, which, I mean, as Judy said, in some cases is already outdated, at least in our community district.
I'm just taking the temperature right now, but everything seems to be okay.
Also, Craig, Judy has a friendly amendment.
Can we unmute Judy?
There's a lot of background noise. I don't know where it's coming from, but if it's coming from anyone other than Craig, could you just mute yourself, or Craig or Mohit or Judy right now? Could you just mute yourself?
And this time it's not coming from me.
Not me. Okay, this goes back to what Kaz says. And I don't know if you want to do this, but since they're going to go ahead with this, it seems whereas since congestion pricing is probably going to happen, we suggest you look at the following. So therefore, we start off with a positive sentence to whatever city agencies or state agencies this is going to, or the MTA, and then list all the things that Mohit put on. How do you feel about that? Some kind of a positive sentence saying, we would like you to look at the following. Since you're going to go ahead with this project anyway, we'd like you to look at the following. Started off as a whereas. Craig, Alita?
Well, let's,
I'm
if
not,
it's a friendly amendment, we should probably have Mohit.
Yeah, but what, okay. Mohit, is he here?
Yeah, sorry, there was some background noise there. That was me. So I'm fine with that general idea. I do want to be cognizant of what the conversation has already surfaced today, which is that there is a divide on the board on our approach towards congestion pricing writ large. And so maybe something along the lines of, if congestion pricing is implemented, then rather than since it will be implemented .
Okay, well, however we put it, but we should always do that. We shouldn't just say no, because then we know they're not going to look at us. So we should
we're
let.
not, I'm sorry, Judy. I don't know why I'm doing this, and I'm sorry for interrupting.
That's
everybody.
okay.
I was just going to say that we're not saying no, we're just saying that these are the kinds of things that we'd like to see, I guess, if it moves forward, which is a neutral expression, because I'm concerned that people will not look at the text of the resolution either way, either if we say no or we say yes, and the focus should really be on the text of the resolution rather than right now, precisely because it was tabled, the idea of opposing congestion pricing, it should be a more neutral kind of statement.
Well, I think the way Mohit worded it was good. And I think that we should do that. I mean, it doesn't just say no, it doesn't say yes to them. It says, look at this stuff. We're listening to you, but look at what we want.
Yes, I was just responding, I think, to your comment that it should say, since it's moving forward, this is what we would like.
Well, okay, Mohit put it a little better, I think.
Yeah, a little more neutral, I think. So
Right.
I'd say it that way. But thank you. Okay. And then next, we have, are we going to the board first, Craig, or the people in the public?
I was
went to Judy because of her friendly amendment. Then
right. I was assuming we should go back to the public and then come back to the board again.
Right. Okay, so next from the public, we'd have Andrew and then Erica and Evelyn in that order.
Hi, thanks again. Just a couple of quick comments. In terms of cause, with all due respect, love you, man. I've heard it's the whole argument for congestion pricing for the last 4 years is that it's a done deal. We just have to deal with it. I literally had a meeting with Liz Kruger and Valerie Mason joined me 3 or almost 4 years ago, where we sat down and we voiced our opposition to congestion pricing. And she said, you know what, it's a done deal. And where are you going to find $1 billion? Well, actually, my answer at that point was tax weed. Well, they're working on that. But I can't say that like a done deal, it's a done deal, is really an argument. We almost lost a Democratic governor in one of the most democratic states in America because of bad policies like congestion pricing, like various, not bail reform, because I won't say that, but sentencing and various other judicial issues. So done deal. It was almost a done deal. She was almost a done deal. In terms of what Alita said regarding East 86th Street, as vice president of the East 86th Street Association, I can tell you, we see this as an utmost concern that people are going to park in and around East 86th Street to hop on the express trains. We have the Q Express, we have the 456. We are a transit hub. We are the Lex is, I think, the 13th most traveled, and 2nd Avenue is the 9th most traveled station, or vice versa. Might have that backwards. In terms of what Craig said, regarding the residential parking permits. I think this is worth a shot. Even if we did half, we did all north side spots or all south side spots on side streets are exclusively for the use of residents that can prove that their registration and insurance is within CB8, then this might be worth a shot. I'm sorry, that's my alarm. In terms of Boaz, Boaz, I hear what you're saying in terms of 25 to 30% of Upper East Siders have cars, and we should listen to the rest of everybody else. And he makes really, really good points. We have to let people know that if congestion pricing goes through, this impacts everybody, whether you're taking an Uber, a Lyft, if you have a disabled relative, elderly relative, if you have a family. In terms of inflation, the life in New York has gotten excessively and dramatically more expensive in the last 2 years, just since COVID started. And we're going to add delivery costs, store costs, everything's going to go up in price. And right now, everything has already gone up in price. Go to the grocery store. If you're a market rate renter, your rent has probably gone up 20% to 30% in the last 2 years. We're going to make living in New York even more expensive.
You froze again, Andrew. So maybe turn off your video is what Saida suggested, if you can hear me.
Oh, not to mention Uber and Lyft. I'm sorry, I'll make it brief and finish off here. I would suggest that this particular committee reintroduce the resolution that was completely ignored by the full board. We went over this for 3 or 4 hours. We agreed. And the only thing that would even make a ripple in city politics is for this community board to say, we reject this outright. Because if you're going to say, I don't want to we want to change how you're going to turn on 59th or 60th Street. Nobody cares about that. Our own community board is not even listening to our own community board committees. We need to make an impact. And the only way to make an impact is to just say no. And we've been at this time and time again. And it's a done deal. No, it's not a done deal. We almost literally flipped government, not we, because I voted for Kathy. But yeah, we almost lost Kathy because of bad ideas like this. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
You know, you raise a couple of interesting points, Andrew. One is that 86th Street is unlike any station anywhere between 59th Street and 125th on the west side, because it's 2 stops both on the Q and on the 4 and 5 there.
Right.
And that's not true on the west side, because you may have an express stop on the Broadway line, but not on the Central Park West line. And so it's not quite the same thing. The other thing is there are 2 neighborhood associations on this call, people who live in large buildings. If you want an informal poll, ask the people that you know, however they come out. I don't know how they'll come out, but you have a network and you have communication possibilities that may be different from the makeup of the board's mailing list. So ask around and report.
And by the way, at one point that I missed, which Kaz mentioned, is that he said that if you're a transit only person, if you're somebody that's only riding buses or riding the train, that you 100% support this. What people have to realize is that the source of funds, the $1 billion, is only going to go to leverage that and $15 billion of more debt. So if you trust the MTA, which has been blatantly mismanaged for decades at this point, to borrow more money, and you think somehow it's going to benefit the transit system, I don't think so. I think we need more responsible governance of these funds, and I don't trust them to borrow another $15 billion.
Well, that's next
Thanks.
month if you're around, Andrew. Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
let's go to Evelyn and then Erica, and then back to the board.
Okay, so I'm listening to all this. The 3 points that were made about, the first one was keeping track of parking. You can't keep track of there. You guys, you do not obviously do not park on Park Avenue or the streets. It is completely filled. Occasionally, a car will come out and you can get a spot. And once you get a spot, you got to hold on to that for like, I don't know, for dear life. There's no movement, hardly any movement in our area in the East 60s. I can guarantee that. Okay. And the 70s, same thing. So keeping track of parking, you can count the spots, and those cars will stay in those spots for as long as they possibly can. Okay. As far as giving parking passes, which is beginning to sound like the only viable solution to this for people that live in the neighborhoods. Now, I have a question for you. Somebody that is a permanent resident in New York City, that would be me, example me. I live on Lexington Avenue. That is my permanent registered address. I vote in New York City in this district, but my car is registered someplace else. That's not a no-no. It's just registered someplace else. I can change my registration. I can be, and the insurance rates are actually cheaper to park in New York City than they are to park where I put I registered my car, thinking that I would be moving. Well, it turns out I haven't left yet. So that's kind of one thing. But if that's going to be a prerequisite, so somebody said just do the passes on side streets. Why on side streets? Open up the whole, I live on Lexington Avenue. I park on Park Avenue. If I can, I won't even invoke the gods, but that's where I park because I'm always in and out of there. And when I leave, I give the spot to a doorman or somebody I know, and we try to hang on and just rotate things because otherwise it's impossible. So I don't know who thinks that there's all this parking. That's and there's something about the fees go up in parking garages. The fees have already gone up in the parking garages. There's $1,500, $1,200, $1,500 in the upper 70s for parking. I mean, somebody's living in a dream world here. You don't understand. It's really, 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 really tough. Okay, that's what I have to say. And the resolution that you come up with, please make it forceful. This is not a done deal yet. And if Kathy Hochul is not listening to all this, then she is not going to be governor for very much long. She just made it in. But we don't want all the other people running in 2 years that are in the legislature to get booted out. So, I mean, it will have an impact. There's absolutely guaranteed. You hit people's pocketbooks with these fees, they won't be able to afford to go to work. I mean, okay. Anyway, that's what I have to say. And I think, you need to be forceful and direct. Well, direct for sure. A lot of people on this calls are the people in Dreamland think it's a wonderful idea. This is not dreamland. This is reality. And people that park in this neighborhood don't necessarily go out and drive around all the time. So anyway, that's what I have to say. And please, if you're going to do parking passes, give us plenty of time to be in compliance. For somebody like me, by the way, who is registered and permanent resident in this district. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Erica?
Erica, you should confirm unmuting on your device.
Thank you. I agree with Andrew. The only logical response to this is the board should, the original proposal should be brought back to the board, and the board needs to say no. One, there's no way at this point that 3 years into COVID and at 45% occupancy rates in Midtown, that there's any dream of bringing in $1 billion a year from this. That's going to happen. Positions, I own my own business. I get approached for remote positions all the time. And that's the way of the corporate world right now. So the whole midtown notion of people coming back to pre-pandemic numbers, that's gone. it's done. Two, I think anything but a forceful, resounding no. And this impacts people who take the sub, who are ardent, who are ardently sub and busway riders. But you know what happens? Tomorrow you wake up and you have an illness that you didn't have the day before, and you can't take the subway and the bus anymore because it doesn't work for you because you have that illness. And I know because that happened to me 13 and a half years ago. But when I do go on the subway and the bus, when I can, when I feel okay, I ride various lines. People are talking about it being a hellscape. It's not a hellscape. Having additional police on the subway doesn't help either. It makes it worse to some degree. But I think the board, I think not this committee, because it's clear where this committee is going, and I appreciate that. But I think it's incumbent on Russell and the board, the actual board chairs, to pull their heads out, because again, around 25% of people in Manhattan have cars, and I think we have to do a resolution and an agreement for the majority of the people that live here. I don't know why this is still hedging and why this is still an issue. So I agree with Andrew. The resolution that was taken previously needs to be resurrected and moved forward, and the board really needs to get this done and off to the respective representatives. But Alita, you and I have talked about this. The MTA has no lockbox. They have never had a lockbox. I mean, you could go back to the inception of the MTA, and misappropriation of funds started from day one. So to think that they're going to be held responsible to this is, I can't see how anybody would think that would be the case. So we just throw good money after bad money with them. And I'm sorry, we shouldn't get penalized for living on one block and having to go down below another block. It's insane. It's just sheer insanity, this whole thing.
Thank you. Okay, Ed, and then Michelle.
Thanks, Alita. Thank you. So, yeah, I agree with Andrew. I've been, if I could have gotten a word in an hour ago, I would have said exactly what Andrew and Erica just said. Is that would be my resolution. That would be my amendment. Is enough with the piecemeal. Look, the data is flawed. Okay, and again, with full disclosure, I have my MPA, so I know my seminars. I'm overeducated. I say that repeatedly at these meetings. I have my JD. I have my MPA from Maxwell, which dealt in reality. For those people out there dealing with reality, yes, that was the beauty of the Maxwell School. I'll plug Syracuse. It was all about reality, okay? Not this seminar-driven vacuum that people are living in. Out on the streets, day to day, elbow to elbow, trying to get spots. You can't find parking out there, and it just flies in the face of reality for someone to come back with a study and tell you that there's no impact. Or, I'd like to see their definition of impact. What is the definition? I didn't see that anywhere. This, look, is a square peg being shoved into a round hole to cause, all due respect, I love you, buddy, but, it was a done deal. Penn Station was a done deal too, till all of a sudden Steve Roth decided that maybe, the office space situation isn't so hot anymore, and maybe I can't build 10 glass towers 100 feet high. Maybe there's a little occupancy problem out there. I would say there's an architecture problem with the glass towers environmentally, but that's a different thing. Also, with respect to some of the groups who push this, allegedly being progressive, I implore them to please contact John Yinger. He's at the Maxwell School. He was on the Council of Economic Advisors. He'll teach you micro and macroeconomics beautifully and teach people the meaning of regressivity. And if you're a progressive and looking at communities who have been getting their teeth kicked in financially, the fact that you're for this is an abomination. I'll say it straight up. Because we need to have it on the record that is just an abomination. Tolls of this kind absolutely burden people at the lowest end of the socioeconomic spectrum. It's a reality. Those are real numbers that you can't academically walk your way around. That's the truth. So to the other points about the MTA having the ability to handle money, I agree wholeheartedly. It's been proven again and again by press sources that are much smarter than me and are above my pay grade intellectually on these matters, chapter and verse. And again, to the point of this raising $1 billion, I would love to see that in one of the meetings for this committee is where the numbers are for the cars to get us to $1 billion, because Alita is absolutely right. That's just the VIG. That's just the VIG, gang, to keep it going, to keep this little machinery going, to quote Matthew McConaughey in Wolf of Wall Street, round it goes, 365, 24/7, right? Round and round it goes. And I don't know how you're going to do it. And it's either fares at the toll box or this. But I just think it needs to be rethought completely. I don't know how they got to this point or how anybody got torqued around to it, but I think it's ill-conceived. I think the underpinnings are starting to show. It's a little bit like the FTX debacle in crypto, not to cast aspersions on people and to conflate the two, but just in terms of the financial underpinnings seem to be coming through. And so that would be what I would suggest. I don't know if there's a second out there for it, but the amendment would be to, and no disrespect to any of my fellow colleagues' amendments to the very thoughtful resolution that Mohit put forward. I'm not disparaging that in any way, shape, or form. It was very thoughtful. I think very good. But I just think that we need to be more forceful and bring back the overall no. Because piecemeal, with all due respect, no one's going to pay attention to it. It's very nice and quiet. It doesn't create any ripples. It doesn't rock the boat, which we're so good at, not rocking the boat. But somebody's got to, because we will be overrun with cars and the parking. And that's just the way it is. People will figure that out. That will be the unintended consequence of reality of the street and how people deal with this. Because I've seen it. I've lived in Washington. I've seen the parking down there. It's terrible. This is how drivers are. It's how people with cars are. And again, I'll just be going and repeating myself. So I just wanted to say that, say my piece. That was it. Thank you, Andrew. I know I see you out there, and Erica, I'll get around to the LinkedIn. I promise. I'm terrible with it, but that's where I would be. And I'll leave it to Michelle and everyone else to carry on the parking. Because I think, I can't say it any better than others did about how hard it is to find it. And like I said, I just think that the study is, to Judy's point, I think the study that you're using is dated. And I think I don't know when they went out and they did this survey. I'm not quite sure. It's like, doing a traffic study on a holiday weekend on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. I've seen one of those before on York Avenue too. So anyway, that's it. Thanks. I'll be quiet, and I'm still here even though I'm behind a little, whatever. Happy Thanksgiving,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
If I don't say that.
Thank you. I've just been unmuted, so I assume it's my turn. A couple of points. Well, just to Ed's recent reference to the study being dated, when the DOT did a study about extending streets and corners, et cetera, they passed everything in 2019 or 20, and it was based on a study done in 2013. It was obsolete on the face of it, but those were the statistics they based their actions on. The second thing is, I just want to say there's a small group, we're talking about 25% of people own cars, and therefore they are not a majority. However, there is not a person in this city that will not be affected by the congestion pricing scheme. Absolutely everything will go up in price. Every food, recreation, entertainment, the theater district, anything, any industry that needs transport, catering facilities, whatever you can think of that has to pass through the zone for whatever reason, whether it be en route or there's a final destination there, the end user of the product that they are carrying will pay the cost. So it's not a matter that it's not affecting anybody else except the 25% of drivers. Just put that one out of your head. It's not true. And especially food costs will go up tremendously. You're talking about the MTA. The question about the MTA is their efficiency. It has been the problem from day one. Nobody that I know of has looked at this. Has anybody, is there a study, is there, or an evaluation or an audit or anything out there of the MTA to see how they got into this position of being so far in debt and behind the curve? I'd like to see that. And if not, there should be something like that done. Let me also say that I'm absolutely against parking permits. And here's the main reason. It will increase the number of car users. The main reason that people do not own cars is because they don't want to pay for the parking, because the parking is a fortune. And so in their own personal budget calculations, they said, you know what, if I give up my car, I can afford to take Ubers and, you know, any car for hire or taxis or whatever I want to take. If I say to that person, well, you know what, you're going to have a parking permit, I'm eliminating that cost for you. Many more people will have cars because that will all of a sudden become cost efficient. It also, however, will fly in the face of our sanitation needs with all alternate side of the street parking. So it's not as though you'll have a parking permit and you'll park your car there for a week and a half and never have to move it. That is not how it will work. And it's far too complicated to start to mete out different parking permits so that we're bringing in the doorman and the teacher and the firefighter, and in addition to the residents. It's too complicated, too annoying, and to my mind has repercussions that we really need to think about. So I am not happy about that. I'm firmly against that. The other thing is just to answer a query from Boaz, just so he knows that others have thought of this, and that is evaluating board effectiveness. Under the chairmanship of Alita, I conducted a 6-year study using Hunter's graduate students from Hunter to evaluate in every committee what percentage of our resolutions were taken into account when given to the reciprocate city agency. I did that for over like 2013 to 19, evaluated all of the resolutions in every single committee, made a presentation to this board with bar graphs and commentary and whatever. The bottom line is the number is about 50%. It's an enormous undertaking. I wouldn't ever have to do it again. And I don't think anybody else would want to do it again. However, I do want to throw out that there are studies that can be conducted by Community Board 8 without using money. And that is by getting interns from the local colleges. Hunter is one, Marymount, there are others, where you give course credits in exchange for an intern giving a certain number of hours of his or her time in a week to conduct the study that you're asking about. And a certain kind of canvassing with some limitations and parameters to be determined by a small group of community board committees or this committee or whatever committee, and have somebody like Hunter, one of the colleges, give you interns to conduct this. This is possible. You can have an intern and tell one intern only goes to First Avenue and another one only does Second, however you want to lay it out. It may not take money, but it is true that there may be monies available from local elected officials or whatever. But the point is, by exchanging college credits, which is a very doable thing, And the colleges are very happy about that, as are the students, those that are majoring or graduate school on city planning or some kind of relevant topic. That's a way to go. And I think that we should definitely consider it. I'm very happy with how Mawit put this resolution together. It's very thoughtful, as his resolutions always are, as are his comments. However, I won't support it. And the reason is because it's us. Granted, we're letting the agency know our concerns, and to that extent, it's excellent. But we are asking them to do certain things to satisfy our concerns. We have zero evidence, both past and present, that they will do that. So I don't want it to make us feel good, like, look, we passed a resolution that asks for consideration without any expectation of getting that consideration. I don't agree that if we don't pass a resolution, we're not doing our job. An ineffectual resolution that leads to nothing doesn't satisfy the criteria of our doing our job. So I give you all that out there, take it under advisement and consideration. My last point, I promise, is to point out that one of the reasons that the congestion pricing resolution that did come out of this committee, one of the reasons that it was is no one was sure as to whether or not it would pass. There was just as much concern about it passing as there was about it failing. And the way that that was dealt with was by tabling it. Say what you want about that, what that says about the community board. Bringing it back, it faces the same concerns. So you have to consider exactly where you want to go with this. And I think that demands a little further discussion rather than throwing it into the mix tonight. So those are my comments. I thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Michelle. I just want to make.
Oh, sorry, Craig. Before
Yeah.
you call it pause.
Go on, and then I want to make a comment because I had a point I wanted to make before that I thought was important, but I forgot.
I have a point that I'm not sure where parliamentary procedure fits in, but I'd like to make, I don't know if this is okay, a friendly amendment if Moet is amenable to it. Am I allowed to do that?
You are, I believe so.
So I'm not really sure how to say this, and maybe we want to unmute Moet, is that given the amount of new construction in the neighborhood, I don't know what impact that has on the number of cars in the street or the parking demand. And so I don't know if there's a way to extrapolate from past into the future and how much additional stress there's just going to be on parking overall, which compounds or exacerbates the problem, if there is one, from congestion pricing and an influx of cars into the neighborhood. So I don't know if that's something that we want to consider, is just how much more cars there are on the street, and therefore the issues with just more and more cars coming from out of town looking for parking.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. The way I've been thinking about the resolution was to really try to center, this number, we might call it the ratio of, cars registered in the district divided by, say, garage spots, and really try to center that as like our key metric, or something along those lines as our key metric, because in my mind, our goal should be to make sure that residents are still, at least as easily as they are today, whether that's easy or not, the residents have an ability to continue to park, in a similar, as easily as they can today, let's put it that way. So that was my thinking on it. And if there is new development that brings in new people, and if those people happen to have cars, then those cars should get added to that ratio. And that should then require the MTA to come back to us and say, okay, well, we have more cars in your district and the number of spots has not changed. And so that's making it hard for people who live there to park their cars. And here's a solution. And the MTA, I'm sure, is going to say something along the lines of improving transit, things that can result in people getting rid of their cars. At some point, there may need to be a more affirmative strategy around actually increasing number of garage spaces. I don't know if we'll hit that point. I don't know if if in my mind, it's likely, but not definitive, that we're going to have an increase in demand for parking in the district after congestion pricing. And so if we do, then do we need more garage spaces as well? So, I think those are some bigger questions that the MTA needs to, I think we just need to measure these numbers. We need to get a source of truth. And then, if things start trending the wrong way, I think we just need the MTA to come back to us with some solutions. So I think
Okay,
new
so
developments,
I have
yeah, go ahead.
another friendly amendment, which
Yeah,
is that the MTA statement or the statement in the EAS that if parking garage fees go up because there's limited on-street parking, and so what if they go up? It's just a way of dramatically reducing demand, I suppose, is that it's unfair burden on residents here to have to pay more for garage space because of the influx of cars looking for parking in order to.
exactly. I agree. I agree with that. So I think that's, I've been sitting down here and actually typing out the resolution that I probably should have before I introduced it. And so I'm happy to drop that in or something. But, I think that's another way of addressing that same, kind of core concern in my mind, which is really trying to maintain the ability for local residents to own and park their own cars, if they so choose. So, so whether that's done through pricing, which is certainly one way, you can measure demand, or whether that's done through, kind of a demand and supply ratio. But we need some kind of metric that we can agree to, and or a metric that the MTA can measure. Whatever's easy. Yeah, it's hard for me to say like what the right number metric is, but we need something that makes sense, that we can measure, that that can tell us in a couple of years what's going on, and if things are getting worse, then kind of puts the MTA in the hot seat to come up with solutions.
I guess so. What I would be asking is that reliance on higher fees in local garages is not an adequate solution, or some other way of putting it into.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair, and that could be in a whereas clause. I think that's a very reasonable statement that, in my mind, is incorporated, in this general idea that, if things are getting more expensive here, particularly relative to community districts that are not adjacent to the CBD, then that's telling us that there's a problem. So, I think that's
and it looks like your language actually says that for that piece of the resolution. It says, if for any set of blocks the price of monthly garage spots increases more than the citywide average, or if the ratio of vehicles registered to residents to garage spots increases, then the MTA shall present solutions to improve parking availability.
Yeah. So, Craig, do you want to drop that? I emailed that to you because I just finished writing that up. Do you want to drop that into the chat?
I meant to do that.
Solutions, I guess I would add solutions other than relying on an increase in such parking fees.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's a good clarification. If you want to clarify that a solution does not mean that prices should go up even further. Yes, I agree with that as a clarifying friendly amendment.
Wait, so how do you want me to word that? And then I'll drop it in the chats.
Let me just wordsmith that for a second, and I'll send something back to you, Craig.
Okay, and while you do that, Alita, you don't mind, I just want to make my one point.
Yes, so, no, go ahead. I've interrupted everybody.
No, it's fine. So I just want to acknowledge what I learned last week. So I attended a transportation conference. It was called a transportation summit that included a lot of government officials. It was sponsored by the online news site City and State. And the keynote speaker was actually the CEO of the MTA, Jana Lieber. And I was really impressed hearing him speak about the system and speak about the challenges and speak about the achievements that the New York City transit system has had. And I actually learned quite a bit about just how much they were able to accomplish, especially during COVID, when they had fewer riders in the system. And aside from my personal opinions that he inspired confidence, the thing that struck me the most was his clarity when it came to the dire financial situation that the MTA is in, and how it seems to be this somewhat underreported at this point, because they've been able to avoid fare increases, and because there have been so many the federal government has stepped in and provided so much funding to counterbalance all the shortfalls that have existed due to the reductions in ridership over the past few years. It's really just a Band-Aid solution, and that federal money is going to run out. And he says it's going to run out very soon. And as a result, it's going to perhaps require at some point consideration of additional fare increases. And he highlighted, just as part of that, the importance of the funding streams from congestion pricing to be able to support projects within the MTA. And if I'm pretty sure that the law, it may not be called a lockbox, but the law does require that it be dedicated towards MTA projects, 80% New York City, 10% Long Island Railroad, 10% Metro North on the transit, and all on the transit side. But I took that as a warning that without that funding, it would be really painful for New York City, and that would be a threat to the vitality of New York City as we all know it to be, because if the subway system and the bus system is not serving passengers or becomes unaffordable, then New York City will fail to be able to be the place that it is. So that's essentially what he said. And I just wanted to at least put that out there. And I'm not trying to discount those who are concerned about the prices that people may pay in car owners and such. But when Kaz makes a statement about people who rely on the transit system supporting it, I'm not saying that maybe that's 100% of people who are transit dependent that would use it, but that would be the reason why people who regularly ride transit would tend to support this. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Well,
And
in response, I heard Jano Lieber on Brian Lehrer, and he was very dismissive of community concerns, even including those expressed by Congressmember Richie Torres in the South Bronx, who's very worried about diesel trucks, without going into that. Second of all, we can't discuss, this is not the right meeting, that the reason that the MTA is in such dire straits is because it can't manage its own money, a lot of people say. And there are significant financial issues that have been raised by, let's see, the Daily News as recently as within the last month. So I think there are a lot of financial issues. I wouldn't be so fast. And I know that you give a lot of care and a lot of consideration, Craig, to all kinds of data and analytics, but I wouldn't be so quick to accept the word of someone who had ample opportunity to prepare remarks and is looking at buckets full, trucks full, boats full of money here. So that's all, but we'll discuss all of that. I recognize what you're saying, and yes, the alternative is bad, but we could talk about the finances next month. I don't know. Anyway, I guess this is not the forum for personal opinions. It's just, he said a lot of different things that should all be, I guess, looked at for a complete picture. But I'm wondering if Evelyn, if you wouldn't mind, because this would be your third time, if we just go to Kaz, who patiently allowed me to interject before he did, and then we'll go to you and then to Leah. I hope that that's okay. So Kaz, you're already muted, and thank you for your patience.
And I just put the resolution in the chat, so if Saida can share it, everyone will be able to have access to it.
Thank you, Craig. You're so good at that. Thank you.
I have 20 points of information. Would you like me to go 1 to 20 or 20 to 1?
You decide. You're making them.
Okay, I'll go to 10. Call the question.
I saw that coming.
Okay. Is there a second?
Is there? Sorry. Yes, Mohit seconded.
Oh yeah, there he is. Okay.
All right. So if we could just
Wait, do we want to just give people a moment to read what's in the chat, Craig, and then we'll vote?
Yes. In the meantime, Saida, if you could just put down all the hands, and then we'll see if anyone is opposed to calling the question. And in the meantime, I will just announce the role at this point of members. If you are a member of this board and don't hear your name, please let me know. It's myself, Alita, Kaz, Ed, John, Judy, Michelle, and Mohit.
I just want to interject. I think Sahar left and maybe came back.
Actually,
so-
I now see her listed on here.
Okay.
Yeah, she didn't have CB8 next to her, so thank you for calling that out.
There we go. Okay, does anyone need time to read this before we see if there are any objections to calling the question? Do you guys want to read it quickly? Okay.
All right, and I'll read it out loud also. Michelle's raising her hand. Do you have a point of information?
She said yes.
Yeah, I'm looking at it in the chat and I see 3 points. I remember 4. Am I wrong?
No, there were only 3.
There was nothing about providing parking.
You mean parking permits?
Yeah, there was
Not-
something
not-
in
that
Monique's
wasn't-
original commentary.
Yeah, no, that wasn't ever in his original resolution.
Okay.
So let me just read this out loud. And then we'll vote on it. So 1, the MTA and/or New York City DOT should annually measure and report to CB8 the following. For the following set of blocks, 60th to 69th, 70th to 79th, 80th to 89th, 90th to 96th, the number of street and garage spots, the number of vehicles registered to addresses on these blocks, and the prices for monthly garage spots in this block on these blocks. 2, if for any set of blocks, the prices for monthly garage spots increase more than the citywide average, or if the ratio of vehicles registered to residents to garage spots increases, then the MTA shall present solutions to improve parking availability that do not rely on further increases in prices for garage spots. And 3, the MTA shall present exemptions from the congestion fee for individuals who park in garages that enter from north of 60th but exit into the CBD. All right, so let's if anyone opposes calling to question, raise your hand now, otherwise we'll take the votes. All right, seeing no hands. If you are in opposition to this resolution, please raise your hand now, board members only. Okay, can we unmute Michelle, please?
No.
All right, can we unmute Ed, please?
I am going to abstain, not because I dislike the resolution. It's just that it doesn't go far enough for me. That's why.
Okay.
That's the money, but I'm just abstaining.
Okay. All right, are there any other no's or abstentions? All right, seeing none, the resolution passes 7 yes, 1 no, 1 abstention.
We talked for a while, and I'm being neutral in this. I'm just asking about residential parking permits. Does anyone have a resolution on that that they would like to make or not? I guess seeing no hands except from the public who can't make resolution motions, then I guess not. Okay. Let's just go to Leah and Evelyn quickly, Craig, before we wrap it up. Is that all right?
Sure.
Unless there's any other business?
Thank you.
Oh, wait, Kaz has his hand raised. I don't know if that's in response to my comment or a question or something different, Kaz.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah, well, both you and Kaz are unmuted. Why don't you go ahead, Leah, and then we'll see and then Evelyn, and then we'll see what Kaz has to say.
I was just trying to point out regarding that resolution that a very large percentage of the cars driven by residents here and parked on the streets or in garages are not registered to the addresses in the district. As somebody, I think it was Evelyn, said earlier, she registers her car somewhere else. I mean, if you walk down the side, it's over a quarter of the cars have out-of-state licenses. And these are cars that are driven by residents. So I'm not certain how that's a relevant number.
Well, if you're asking whether there would be a mechanism to allow registration as a resident, even if your car is registered someplace else, I imagine that if there's an inclination to do so, that there are ways of doing that. We're not
I'm
talking
only
about
saying
voting.
that if you're trying to measure the effect of congestion pricing by looking at the number of cars, by assessing the number of cars registered to garage spots, that number changes for reasons that are unrelated to congestion pricing, because so many of the cars that are driven by residents and parked on the streets or in garages, so many of them are not registered here. So looking at that number of registered cars is not realistic because so many are not registered here.
Mohit, I see that your hand is raised. Are you responding to that? If you are, just give a thumbs up, please.
Yeah, I can. So just very briefly, yeah, I think that's a very valid concern. I don't know what the ratio is of cars that are registered to their residential address versus somewhere else, but it could very well be there could be a disparity there. So I mean, just two really quick points. One is I think based on some of the feedback from this call from this conversation this evening, I had added in the pricing measurements, which I think kind of are a more comprehensive measure of demand, and so hopefully that would address all demand for garage parking and not just depend on a ratio that may not cover all the cars. But secondly, so long as the ratio of cars that are registered in the district, so long as the same percentage, say 50% of cars are registered here and 50% registered somewhere else, so long as that ratio kind of stays constant, then then that ratio that we're measuring will still be a consistent measure of demand. And so there is, I think, some information still to be found from measuring that ratio, but I take your point that there's just no clean data here, and it would be it would be amazing if we could really measure very cleanly how many cars are parked by residents on a regular basis in the CB8 district. But I'm just not sure there's a really easy way of measuring that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Evelyn?
And then Kaz.
Hi, thank you. Both of the previous two are correct. Okay, so the way to do this, I know a number of people that park their cars here. They are not registered, their cars are not registered in the district, but they are permanent residents in the district. Okay, if people are permanent residents in the district and live here full-time, or yes, live here full-time, vote here, permanently registered, they should have the right to park their car in the district, period. Okay, and the way you'll have to put out a poll. You will have to make a huge announcement. I mean, you could do this through the voting. I don't know. I'm trying to think of lists of names and how do people get to people who are registered in the district. The people that vote in the district on the voting rolls, if there was a way to hook up with that. Right now, if you go to get your license renewed, you can register to vote, right? So all that information is with the voting people. I'm just thinking of ways to make this completely fair. Because if you only look at people who registered their cars in the district who are permanent residents in the district, you are not going to get a number. That makes it not close, not even close. I know that because I park. I'm out there all the time parking. And by the way, I'm also a teacher. I hate to tell you. So looking at ways where you could tell permanently registered people who vote in this district who have cars, is that a way to look at it? I don't, it would be in CB8, which is a huge district, which encompasses many different voting areas, right? And I don't know if you can get to that information or not. I mean, maybe you could. If we're trying to actually help people, I don't know, put out news bulletins, get on Spectrum One, start doing a blitz, okay? You got to go and register with CB8. Everybody that wants a parking pass, register with CB8. Trust me, the news will get around. You could put leaflets on people's cars announcing how to register with CB8 to get a parking pass but you have to prove you're a permanent resident. I don't know. And even there, people will be up in arms because some people live here all the time, but are maybe, I don't know, are they permanent residents or not? I don't know. You have to figure that one out. I know I am, so whatever. Okay, just putting it out there. Not to confuse the issue, but I'm confusing the issue. Okay? Maybe possibly clearing it up a little bit with some solutions, creative solutions. Okay, there. Thank you.
Well, thank you for creating that confusion. Yeah. I think this is a microcosm of how confusing the topic is and the policies that would be related to a residential parking program would be and why it would be, and I'm not providing an opinion on it, why it would be so challenging for one to be developed, especially as quickly as we would hope for the purposes of congestion pricing mitigation. Because these are difficult questions and require a lot of debate and consideration. Excuse me. So let's go to Kaz.
Yeah, I have a point of information and then I'm going to move to adjourn. I park in a garage. There are 2 taxes that the garage charges. If I'm a permanent resident in New York City, I do not pay the extra tax. If I park in a garage and I am not a resident or my car is not registered in New York City, I pay that extra tax. So there is information and data on who parks in the garage, who is a resident and who is a non-resident. That's point number 1. Then I move to adjourn.
Thank you, Kaz. Thank you for the point on the garages and the tax and the residency. Okay, I see we have 2 thumbs up. And a big grin on Craig. Let me say, he said in the beginning, I'll just say now, in case anyone joined after he said, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. And thank you for joining on what's probably a very busy or hectic week. Have a great holiday. We don't yet have a date for December, although as Craig said, we do have an agenda. So as soon as there's a date, it will go up on the calendar. Follow us and please join. Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving, early for happy holidays. Good night, everyone. Thank you, Saida. Thank you. And happy Thanksgiving, Saida.
No problem. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Bye.